Here we go, continuing our journey and understanding of China. This week we're going to head off to the topic of the Communist Revolution in China, an event that was truly transformative to our world. And of course, Communist China continues to impact the world in vast ways. The look is a little different today, so you still have the 2 pages that I'm going to read for you and take some active notes. But I went ahead and put some questions here at the bottom. So let's take a look at those first because that might help guide your reading. So it says, answer the following questions and submit your responses to Schoology. So perhaps this week your active talk to the text notes that take place up here, as well as the answers to these questions, could end up being one submission. And just to clarify what that means here on the right hand side, we didn't particularly like these questions. So instead of doing these this week, we're going to focus on these 3 questions. All right, so what are they to help guide our reading? Who are the 2 groups and the leader of each group involved in China's civil war? So we need 2 different groupings. You could even color code those groupings. Name a group and a leader in one color, and perhaps name the other leader and other group in a different color. The second question, letter B, is a why question. Why were some Chinese attracted to the Communist Party? So what made this a system that people were interested in? And then finally, question C, explain 2 to 5 ways Chairman Mao and the communist changed China. So that's what you want to focus on as you read. So let's get started. Communist China, the main idea here. The Chinese Communist Party under Mao Zedong significantly changed life in the People's Republic of China. As you have read, China fell under the control of European powers in the 1800s. The Chinese Nationalist Party wanted to end this foreign control and modernize China. So I see 2 goals here. One, they want to end foreign control, they meaning the Nationalist Party. And 2, they want to modernize the country so they're no longer at the whims of the European powers. So let's make China its own self-fulfilling country. The party overthrew, now remember this is the Chinese Nationalist Party that we're referring to here, overthrew the ruling government and established the Republic of China in 1912. So here is a birthday, and I know some of you like creating birthday cakes sometimes. I don't know, you get a kick out of that. So I like chocolate cakes, so we'll go over here. We'll try and make a swirly line. Let me work this here, and here's my cake with some candles on it. Works for me. So they're born in 1912. Over time, the Chinese people began to turn to the Communist Party. So now we have 2 parties here. I'm seeing mentions up here of the Chinese Nationalist Party, okay, which we've been talking about up here, but then also we're looking at the Communist Party, which arose in Shanghai in 1921. So this is kind of nice because China's born in 1912. If you swap those last 2 numbers, you get the Chinese Communist Party birth. You could draw another birthday cake there if you wanted to. Arose in Shanghai. And you guys remember when we did our maps that Shanghai was one of the locations. We were careful to label. I think we get a map over here of China coming in a little bit blurry on the iPad. Shanghai is not clearly labeled on this map. Okay, so headed back to our notes. Apologize for the slow speed of the iPad here. Many young people in particular believe that the communists would be better able to modernize China. So these are their thoughts. Hey, maybe they'll be the ones. We need the Communist Party to make China its own self-fulfilling, self-sustaining country. The nationalists and communists began a long struggle for power. By 1930, the 2 groups were locked in a bloody civil war. All right, so here we have a civil war between 2 groups. One group is the nationalists, the other group is the communists, and it sounds like this date, 1930. If you think of a world context, these are the era of the Great Depression, but they are locked in a bloody civil war where people are dying. So, the Civil War, what's it like? In 1933, nationalist leader Jiang Jieshi gathered a large army and attacked the communists in their mountain base in Jiangxi province. Knowing they were outnumbered, the communists fled to their base in Shanxi province. So we got a couple things going on here. Let's go back to some color coding. Zhang Zhishi is the leader of the nationalists. So make sure that's one of the answers to your questions. Make sure you associate those two. And the communists, I'll go ahead and start marking them in red. Between 1934 and 1935, Mao Zedong led the 100,000 communists. So here is your other leader, and he is the leader of the Communist Party. So basically, this is what makes up our civil war, these two groups fighting each other. So Mao Zedong led about 100,000 communists over rough terrain. Come back. Here we go. Sorry about that. On a series of marches that came to be known as the Long March. Tens of thousands of communists died during the marches. And the Long March is really a fascinating topic that is covered here by this map. You can see the focus is China's Communist Revolution, and these different arrows down here represent where the Long Marchers went. So you can see this is a whole process of marching around the country, trying to evade the nationalists. But during this march, they encountered a lot of the Chinese people, and Mao demanded that his soldiers and marchers were respectful to the people in the countryside. And through the process of this long march, which you can see lasted a year, a lot of communists died, but the communists were also starting to win the popular support of the people in China. All right, let's try and get rid of some of my marks there. All right, now we need to take a look at events surrounding the globe because things really start to change. This long march is taking place, and that's great. But the world started to have a more significant issue. In 1937, here come the Japanese, and they invade China and occupy or took possession of parts of the country. Now, the nationalists and communists set aside their differences to fight their common enemy. And of course, the common enemy is the Japanese. So nothing unifies two groups more than having an outside force come and attack and possibly take something away from both those groups. So both the nationalists and the communists want to preserve their nation of China, so now they're willing to fight together. The two groups remained united. Remember the two groups we're talking about, nationalists and communists. And do you remember the two leaders? You should have answered that question. Nationalist leader, Chiang Kai-shek. Communist leader, Mao. Okay, very good. The two groups remained united against Japan throughout World War II. After the war, which you may remember from studies of American history, the war ends with those two atomic bombs dropped in August of 1945. After the war, the nationalists and communists started fighting again. So now we no longer have this outside enemy. It's time to go back to fighting each other. On October 1st, 1949, so I'm going to pick the color red again because this is the birth date. If you want to do your little birthday cake again over here, yay! The communists declared victory and established the PRC, or the People's Republic of China, on the mainland. So you could give this a little PRC on your cake. That's how you might label it. And say, happy birthday, the People's Republic of China, a communist nation born when? Right, October 1st, 1949. The nationalists fled and established a government in Taiwan, an island off the coast of the mainland. And Taiwan's going to be something that we'll focus on a little bit later on in our study of this part of Asia. So let's talk about Chairman Mao, the communist leader who has just helped his communist people after their long march, their efforts with the nationalists against Japan. Now they have birthed a brand new country called the PRC. As chairman of the Communist Party, Mao became the leader of China and established a totalitarian dictatorship. So immediately your mind might go to other totalitarian leaders. Hitler, Mussolini maybe comes to mind. The government seized farmland. So these are actions of totalitarians. Forced the peasants to work on collective farms. And I notice this word collective farms is bolded which tells me it must be important. Between 200 and 300 families lived and worked on each collective farm, which was strictly supervised by the government. So this is kind of our definition here of what a collective farm would look like. All of us taking our pitchforks and our rakes and going out and working each day. So 200 to 300 families in Fairview, we march out to the local fields and we start planting strawberries or growing wheat or whatever it is we're going to do. Perhaps rice. The government also, so this isn't the only thing the government controls is farming, took over businesses and industries. You can imagine how that would go over in the United States of America. By 1957, industrial output had greatly increased. So if they are increasing their output, I would say that's my smiley face economy. Their economy must be starting to thrive, and they're able to produce what they need for themselves rather than having to import it. Encouraged by this initial success, Mao set a plan in motion called the Great Leap Forward to make China's economy grow even faster. But the plan failed. Government's poor management of China's industries slowed economic growth. Then you had crop failures, severely reduced agricultural years. After an estimated 20 million people had died of hunger, something you would think is preventable, Mao ended his plan in 1961. So the Great Leap Forward, think of that as an epic fail on the part of Mao. 5 years later, Mao began a new plan called the Cultural Revolution. So now let's try this. To remove what he considered anti-communist elements from China. So he wants everybody all in with the communist beliefs. To carry out the plan, young people belonging to the military groups known as the Red Guards attacked anyone who they considered elite or superior. They particularly targeted, here we go, teachers and intellectuals. Thousands of people were killed in the violence. So they don't want any resistance. They don't want any opposition. So they are going to, these Red Guards and the communists are going to make sure that they eliminate people who might be a threat, such as the intellectuals and the spokespeople in society, and the teachers who could educate the next generation. After Mao died in 1976, so that might be an important date to kind of check in there, the situation slowly began to change in China. Today, the country is still communist. So that came up in a couple comments I saw from people wondering its status today. And indeed, communism is still considered officially the economic policy and the political policy of the country. But reforms began in the 1980s that have resulted in great economic growth and improved the lives of the Chinese people. So you probably know a lot about China's economy, at least before the time of COVID was really booming, and you may be wearing something made in China or have things about your house that were also made in China. Good chance to check your labels if you want to. Across the bottom, you have an interesting timeline. It reminds you of these dates. Remember 1912, when China is kind of birthed as an independent nation. And then in 1921, the Communist Party is founded. Remember I told you how those dates switch, so you have 1912 here, and then down here you have 1921 with the Communist Party. Then the Long March takes place. That map is something you can look at. Then you see this unification. So I'm putting like this linked thing where the communists and nationalists fight together against Japan. And then by the 1940s, always get my lines messed up there, it appears that the communists have won. So 1949 is a really important date. This is when the PRC, or People's Republic of China, was born. And you recall the first leader, again, was Mao Zedong. And then by 1966, we learned about his, there he is, as a young man, look at that. They began the Cultural Revolution, and then he had different reforms, and we know that people died during the Great Leap Forward. However, when he dies in 1976, that leads to some reforms in the 1980s, and voila, we arrive today at a China that is situated pretty well, although who knows what the blowback will be from the Wuhan coronavirus and it originating in China. So that should give you a good sense. Look at all that text talk that I did. You should do the same. That should give you a good sense of the Communist Revolution. You'll want to spend some time answering these 3 questions with quality responses, and then go ahead and submit this. Okay, well done. Good job. Thanks, guys, for listening.